thank you so much for having me to your studio today. Your work is so beautiful. I don't know really how to even start. I'm not going to try to describe it because I want to hear that in your words. But before we get there, when did you start painting?
Well, people ask me that a lot. Actually, oil painting I just started about 8 years ago, but I've been an artist my whole life. I mean, I started drawing when I was 2, and then, it just kind of morphed into other things that were creative in my life, and I made a living for 40 years as a hairdresser.
Oh my gosh.
And I was an auctioneer and a realtor, and, but then I went back to college at age 55 and took a course in historic preservation. And my final project was to create a diptych, which is 2 pieces of art that go together for a wall finish. And after I did that, my instructor said, well, you've missed your calling. You should have been an artist all along. And I thought, I'm still here.
Yeah. Was that intimidating at all? Or did you just think, yeah, you know what, you're right. This is in me and now I'm gonna go for it.
Well, I think it was kind of a combination of things because I've always been creative, but it kind of hit home because I thought, I'm 55. It's time to really pursue what I love and my joy, and everything I've done in my life I've loved. But I guess, the painting and drawing part had to take a back seat because I had to make a living.
Yeah. Okay, tell me how you learned to create these beautiful pieces. I mean, they are incredible, and I don't even know where one begins.
Well, I started drawing people at a very young age. Actually, I drew clothes on my dad's Playboy magazine, women. That was the start of it with a purple crayon.
Oh my God.
But I drew paper dolls. I mean, I always had a connection to people.
Yeah.
And so that was just a natural thing for me to draw. And then I also liked drawing ballet dancers and horses when I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became a hairdresser, so I was creating, it was kind of like sculpting because you have this mass of hair and you're making a shape that goes with that person's body type or whatever. And, and color, coloring hair, the chemistry is pretty similar to painting. And so understanding color theory and that kind of, took that.
Yeah. Do you think also that being a hairdresser and really studying people for 40 years contributes? I mean, because I imagine as you're looking, like you mentioned, at the shape of someone's face and all of that, you get a real sense, but how do you know how to translate that? I don't know how you get that from your head onto the canvas.
Yeah. Well, I think really it's all about shape. And so if you think in terms of shapes, you can create something on a 2D surface. It has to do with how light hits form and then rendering that on a 2D surface. So
I read that you really tried to capture more than just somebody's features. You don't see eyes and a nose, and you see a soul. How do you capture that? How do you get that to come through?
I don't really think about it. I just, I communicate. I have some kind of a relationship with my sitter or the environment, whatever. The first thing is, why do I want to paint this? And so it's like, I don't want to paint everybody I see, but certain people speak to me, and then that's when I want to paint them. But in doing a commission, it's kind of interesting because people will send me photos, and it's usually like digital photos because they want to surprise somebody and they don't want them to know. And then I'll get all these photos and 3 photos of somebody, and they all look different in each photo. And it's like, okay, so which one is he?
Yes, yes. Who is this person?
Yeah, and so that's challenging at times, but I try to pull some kind of essence out of it.
Yeah. Okay, I think that your process is especially unique because you prefer to draw from life or paint from life, to have an actual, you mentioned a sitter. How do you go about doing it? First of all, I mentioned to you, I couldn't sit still. And you said, no, you don't have to sit still. We just have a conversation. How are you able to make that work?
Well, I enjoy seeing the different inflections in the facial features. So like, if you're just sitting poker face, but you're a smiley or bubbly person, right, then I don't feel like I can get that much of your spirit.
Yeah.
And I had an incident where I was painting someone and a reporter came in. This was for another project I did. But while the reporter was there, my sitter was talking to the reporter, and I had no communication with that person. And so I really struggled to get their image down. I mean, just pulling something out of them. And as soon as they left, then I was able to bring out something from that person. So I don't really know what it is, but I just feel like it's something, it was a gift, that I need to pursue, so.
I completely understand how it would be easier to understand someone's essence if they're sitting for you rather than having photos. However, the stakes are so much higher. Does it feel like that to you, or am I making that up? It just seems like if you have someone sitting there in front of you, there's this pressure to make it amazing rather than just looking at the photo and not having anybody watch.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I like the pressure in a sense. I guess I'm sort of an adventurous type, but that brings to mind a time where there were a group of artists and we hired a model, and she was, in the model stand, and then we give them breaks every 20 minutes. So she walked around and she went from person to person's easel and looked at the work, and a lot of the artists were just mingling around and during that break time. And she came over to my painting and she said, "How do you know what I'm thinking in my head?" And that was just like, ooh, wow, that's really special. That's a real big compliment that she gave me.
So do you feel that in addition to your artistic talent, that you have that talent for reading people, for sort of capturing their essence?
Well, I used to say I was a gypsy, but maybe a bit. I mean, I think it stems way back to my early childhood days. And anybody really, when you're in the crib, the only form of communication you have are people's faces and their expressions. And so you try to pull out a meaning from all of that when you're having a silent conversation with them.
Yeah.
So and then as a hairdresser, it's like a very one-on-one, touchy-feely kind of thing that you have with your client. And I was a matchmaker for like 4 different hair clients because I would listen to them and I'd say, "I think this guy would be good for you." Or
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So really it has, all of your life experience has led up to what I see around me. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think art, it's a thing where you don't have to be young. I think as you get older, you gain more life experience, and I think it all translates to your canvas. And so it can be maybe a fuller experience.
Okay, now I want to talk a little bit more about the colors. You mentioned that mixing paint is much like mixing hair color. Which is wild, but do you see it in your head first and then make it happen in terms of mixing the color, or do you let the color kind of dictate? Which comes first?
Well, I think you have to start out with local color, which is, if I'm painting something representational, I will see what the color is, and that's called local color, what the color to be. And then it depends on the color of the light or the temperature of the light that's hitting it. And then, you have to do a lot of thinking. So, if you're really trying to paint representationally, it's not like you can just turn music on and zone out.
Right.
When you're painting intuitively, that's different. But so if I'm trying to match, I'll try to match, but then because of my knowledge that I've had stored up, I'll do certain things to the painting to really make the color pop. Or if I want the viewer's eyes to go to a certain area, then I know exactly what I have to do with color and value to bring the viewer to that area of the painting. And so,
knowing that you have such a talent for portrait work, I was interested to see that you also do such beautiful landscapes, you do still life. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer to do the portrait work?
Well, yeah, I love painting people, but it's all about light, and it's how light falls on form. And so when I'm outside in the landscape, I try to find, it's not as exciting for me to paint during a gray day because I'm not really seeing like a pop of light and shadow.
Right.
But it's a challenge, and so I like to accept a lot of challenges.
I can tell. I can tell. What is the best part about expressing yourself in this way?
When people come up to my work and I can see emotion, if they, I've actually had people cry when they were looking at some of my paintings, tears running down their face, and and I've had that experience looking at some of the master artists in a museum. Not that I'm equating myself with any of them, of course, but yeah, to see somebody emote when they're looking at your work is like the highest compliment you could get.
Yeah. So. You do beautiful work, and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today. Best of luck in all your new challenges.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me this time.